Psychic Children, Extraordinary Claims and Real-Life Stories. Part 1. When Children Know the Impossible. Throughout history, stories have emerged of children who seem to know things they should never have learned. A 4-year-old describes a tragic accident before it happens. A young girl tells her parents intimate details about strangers she has never met. A boy insists that he can hear thoughts before anyone speaks them aloud. Another child wakes from a dream predicting a family emergency that unfolds exactly as described only hours later. Coincidence? Exceptional intuition? Extraordinary memory? Or evidence that some children may possess abilities science has yet to explain? Few subjects generate as much fascination and controversy as the phenomenon of psychic children. Across cultures and throughout history, parents, teachers, psychologists, paranormal investigators, and researchers have documented reports of children displaying abilities that appear to extend beyond the 5 senses. Claims include telepathy, reading another person's thoughts; clairvoyance, seeing distant places or hidden objects; precognition, knowing future events before they occur; psychometry, receiving information by touching objects; mediumship, claiming to communicate with deceased individuals; extraordinary intuition that repeatedly proves accurate. These reports often begin very early in life, sometimes before a child can even read or write. Many parents insist their children have no possible way of knowing the information they reveal. Others dismiss the events as imagination, coincidence, or misunderstood memories. Scientists remain deeply divided. Some researchers argue that unusual experiences deserve careful investigation because children may be less influenced by expectation or cultural conditioning than adults. Skeptics counter that childhood imagination is remarkably powerful and that confirmation bias, suggestion, selective memory, and coincidence can easily create the illusion of psychic ability. Laboratory studies have yet to produce broadly accepted evidence that such abilities exist under controlled conditions. This is why psychic children remain one of the most intriguing mysteries in both psychology and parapsychology. Unlike stories involving professional psychics, children generally have little to gain from making extraordinary claims. Many actually become frightened by their experiences. Some try desperately to convince adults that what they are experiencing is real. Others eventually stop talking about their abilities after facing disbelief or ridicule. One fascinating pattern appears repeatedly in reported cases. Many children describe these experiences between the ages of 3 and 7. As they grow older, the reports often diminish or disappear entirely. Why would that happen? Supporters believe children gradually lose a natural sensitivity as logical thinking develops. Psychologists suggest that imagination, memory formation, and social learning change dramatically during these years, naturally reducing experiences that once felt vivid or meaningful. Both explanations continue to be debated. This audiobook does not begin with assumptions. Instead, it explores some of the world's most famous reports involving alleged psychic children. We'll examine stories that astonished families, challenged investigators, inspired scientific research, and fueled decades of controversy. We'll also look carefully at alternative explanations. Could these cases reveal something genuinely unknown about the human mind? Or are they examples of how easily remarkable stories can grow through coincidence, expectation, and memory? The answer may not be simple. Some cases appear surprisingly ordinary once investigated closely. Others continue to puzzle even experienced researchers. Whether you approach this topic as a believer, a skeptic, or simply someone fascinated by the mysteries of consciousness, the stories ahead invite an open mind balanced with careful critical thinking. Because sometimes the most extraordinary mysteries begin not with famous psychics, but with children who quietly say something no one expects, and somehow turn out to be right. Part 2. Psychic Children Through History. The idea that some children possess extraordinary mental or spiritual abilities is far older than modern psychology. Long before scientists attempted to study consciousness in laboratories, nearly every civilization preserved stories of gifted children whose knowledge seemed impossible to explain. These accounts appear in religious writings, folklore, royal histories, and oral traditions passed down for centuries. Although the details differ from culture to culture, certain themes appear again and again. A child speaks with wisdom far beyond their years. A young boy or girl predicts an important event before it happens. A child claims to see people or places invisible to everyone else. Or a youngster demonstrates knowledge that seems impossible to have learned through ordinary means. Whether these stories represent genuine mysteries, powerful myths, or cultural symbolism remains a matter of debate. But their remarkable consistency has captured human imagination for thousands of years. In ancient Egypt, children were sometimes believed to possess a special closeness to the spiritual world. Because they had only recently entered life, some traditions suggested they remained more connected to divine forces than adults, whose minds had become occupied by everyday concerns. Across ancient Greece, philosophers debated whether knowledge was acquired solely through experience or whether the soul possessed deeper memories carried into life. Although these discussions were philosophical rather than paranormal, they laid the groundwork for later ideas about unusual childhood awareness. In many indigenous traditions around the world, children who displayed vivid dreams, unusual perceptions, or remarkable intuition were not automatically viewed as abnormal. Instead, elders often watched these children carefully. Some believed they might become future healers, spiritual leaders, or visionaries. Rather than suppressing unusual experiences, communities sometimes encouraged children to describe them openly while teaching them humility and responsibility. Across parts of Asia, beliefs about reincarnation introduced another fascinating possibility. If consciousness continues after death, could some children retain fragments of memories from previous lives? Reports occasionally emerged of young children recognizing unfamiliar places, identifying deceased individuals, or recalling events that families claimed they could never have known. Some of these cases would later become the focus of modern scientific investigation. In medieval Europe, however, unusual children were often viewed through an entirely different lens. During periods of intense religious belief and fear of the supernatural, extraordinary behavior could be interpreted as either divine blessing or dangerous influence. A child claiming to see visions might be celebrated in one community yet feared in another. History shows that cultural beliefs often shaped how unusual experiences were understood. The same event could be interpreted in completely different ways depending on the society observing it. A child describing invisible companions might be considered spiritually gifted in one culture. Elsewhere, the same child might be referred to physicians, clergy, or psychologists. These differences remind us that human interpretation plays a powerful role in every extraordinary claim. Even today, parents faced with unusual statements from their children respond in very different ways. Some encourage open discussion. Others quietly document what happens. Many seek medical advice. Some contact religious leaders. And a few eventually reach out to paranormal investigators. The child's experience may be identical. The explanation changes depending upon the beliefs of the adults involved. As interest in science grew during the 19th century, stories of psychic children gradually shifted from folklore into the realm of investigation. Rather than simply accepting or rejecting extraordinary claims, researchers began asking important questions. Could children actually perceive information beyond the normal senses? Were some reports based on coincidence? Could memory, suggestion, or unconscious observation explain seemingly impossible knowledge? Or might entirely new aspects of human consciousness still remain undiscovered? These questions became especially important during the rise of psychology in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Researchers interested in hypnosis, dreams, intuition, and altered states of consciousness occasionally encountered reports involving children whose experiences seemed unusually difficult to dismiss. Some investigators believed young children might provide ideal research subjects because they had not yet developed many of the expectations and biases found in adults. Others argued exactly the opposite. Children are naturally imaginative. They often blur fantasy and reality. Their memories can be influenced by repeated questioning. Their desire to please adults may unintentionally shape their answers. These concerns remain central to modern research. Today, scientists studying extraordinary childhood claims emphasize the importance of careful documentation, independent verification, and controlled testing. A single remarkable story may be fascinating, but it is rarely enough to establish evidence for psychic abilities. Instead, researchers look for repeated patterns, accurate predictions made before events occur, and information that can be independently confirmed. Even then, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. Yet despite more than a century of investigation, no consensus has emerged. Some cases have been convincingly explained through ordinary means. Others remain unresolved, continuing to fuel debate among psychologists, neuroscientists, parapsychologists, and skeptics alike. In the next chapter, we'll move beyond history and into some of the best-known real-life cases, stories of children whose extraordinary claims attracted worldwide attention and continue to spark discussion decades later. Part 3: The Pollock Twins, Memories That Shouldn't Exist? One of the most widely discussed cases involving extraordinary childhood memories began in a quiet English village during the 1950s. Unlike stories of telepathy or predicting the future, this case centered on something equally mysterious. Two young girls appeared to remember lives that, according to their family, they had never lived. To some researchers, it became one of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting reincarnation. To skeptics, it demonstrated how grief, suggestion, and family influence can shape childhood memories. The story remains one of the most debated cases in paranormal research. It began on May 5, 1957. In the small town of Hexham, Northumberland, England, two sisters, 11-year-old Joanna Pollock and 6-year-old Jacqueline Pollock, were walking to church with a friend. A speeding car driven by a woman who had reportedly lost control struck the children. All three were killed instantly. The tragedy devastated the Pollock family. Their parents, John and Florence Pollock, struggled to cope with the unimaginable loss. John Pollock held a strong personal belief in reincarnation, despite it not being a traditional teaching of his Catholic faith. He became convinced that somehow his daughters would return. Florence, however, did not share this belief. She expected no such miracle. About a year later, Florence became pregnant again. Doctors believed she was carrying a single child. Instead, she unexpectedly gave birth to identical twin girls. They were named Jennifer and Jillian. At first, nothing appeared unusual. They developed like most children. But as they grew older, their parents began noticing curious similarities to their deceased sisters. Jennifer, one of the twins, had two distinctive birthmarks. One appeared on her forehead in almost the same location where Jacqueline had suffered a scar after falling from a bicycle years earlier. Another birthmark resembled one Jacqueline had on her hip. Supporters of the case viewed these physical similarities as significant. Medical experts, however, point out that birthmarks are relatively common and can occur naturally without requiring any extraordinary explanation. The more intriguing reports emerged when the twins began talking. Around the age of 3, Jillian and Jennifer allegedly recognized toys that had belonged to Joanna and Jacqueline. According to their parents, the toys had been stored away and were not regularly shown to the twins. Yet the girls reportedly identified them by name and claimed they belonged to them. On several occasions, they described locations they had supposedly never visited. During family trips back to Hexham, the twins appeared familiar with streets, parks, and landmarks connected to their deceased sisters. One account describes the girls recognizing the local school and discussing it as though they had attended. Supporters argued that they possessed memories from another lifetime. Skeptics suggested that subtle family conversations, photographs, or unconscious cues may have provided the information without the children realizing its source. Another frequently cited episode involved automobiles. The twins reportedly became frightened whenever a car approached them unexpectedly. They would cling to one another and cry that a vehicle was coming to get them. Considering how their older sisters had died, believers viewed these reactions as deeply significant. Psychologists caution, however, that young children often develop fears without supernatural causes. Parental anxiety can also unintentionally influence a child's emotional responses. As the twins reached about 5 years of age, something interesting happened. The unusual memories gradually faded. The girls stopped referring to events connected with Joanna and Jacqueline. Their lives became increasingly ordinary. This pattern, the disappearance of extraordinary memories during early childhood, has been reported in numerous alleged reincarnation cases around the world. Some researchers argue that this consistency deserves careful attention. Others note that childhood imagination naturally changes with age as memory, reasoning, and identity mature. The Pollock twins case later attracted the attention of researchers studying children who claimed unusual memories. It became one of the most frequently discussed examples in books exploring reincarnation and consciousness. Yet despite decades of examination, no universally accepted explanation has emerged. Supporters point to the birthmarks, recognitions, and detailed statements made at a very young age. Skeptics emphasize the family's beliefs, possible information leakage, selective memory, and the difficulty of independently verifying events years after they occurred. Both perspectives raise important questions. Can grief influence the way parents interpret their children's words? Can children unknowingly absorb information from adults and later believe it to be their own memories? Or do rare cases like this hint at aspects of consciousness that science has not yet fully understood? Whatever conclusion one reaches, the Pollock twins remain one of the most compelling and controversial stories in the study of extraordinary childhood experiences. Their case reminds us that the line between mystery and explanation is often far more complex than it first appears. In the next chapter, we'll explore children whose remarkable claims were not about past lives, but about knowing events before they happened, cases of alleged precognition and extraordinary intuition that left families searching for answers. Part 4: Children who seem to know the future. Imagine your child waking in the middle of the night after a frightening dream. They're upset. They insist something terrible is about to happen. At first, you assume it was simply a nightmare. But hours later, events unfold in a way that closely resembles what they described. Was it a coincidence? A lucky guess? Or could the child have experienced a genuine glimpse of the future? Stories like these have been reported throughout history. Unlike claims of seeing ghosts or remembering past lives, these cases involve precognition, the alleged ability to perceive future events before they occur. Children are often at the center of such stories because many adults believe young minds are less constrained by expectations and more willing to describe unusual experiences without filtering them. Psychologists, however, suggest another possibility. Children dream vividly. They imagine countless scenarios every week. Most are quickly forgotten. But when one dream happens to resemble a later event, it becomes unforgettable, while the many dreams that never come true fade from memory. This tendency is known as selective recall, and it plays an important role in how people interpret extraordinary experiences. Even so, some reported cases continue to puzzle both believers and skeptics. One of the most common themes involves family emergencies. Parents have reported children suddenly insisting that a grandparent is sick, that a relative is in danger, or that someone needs immediate help. Sometimes, a phone call arrives shortly afterward confirming that an accident, illness, or other crisis has occurred. Supporters argue that these incidents suggest some form of psychic connection between family members. Skeptics point out that families experience illnesses and emergencies regularly, making occasional coincidences statistically inevitable. Another frequently reported pattern involves transportation accidents. Some children have refused to board school buses, family cars, or airplanes without being able to explain why. When no accident occurs, the incident is quickly forgotten. But if something unusual later happens, the story often becomes part of family history. This creates an important challenge for investigators. To evaluate claims scientifically, predictions must be recorded before the event occurs. Human memory is surprisingly flexible. After dramatic events, people often remember earlier conversations differently than they originally happened. Researchers therefore look for written records, diary entries, recorded phone calls, or multiple independent witnesses. Without such evidence, it becomes extremely difficult to determine exactly what was said beforehand. One well-known example often discussed in paranormal literature involves children who reportedly predicted natural disasters. In several accounts, youngsters became unusually anxious days before earthquakes, floods, or storms. Some refused to enter certain buildings. Others repeatedly warned family members that something bad was coming. In most cases, investigators later discovered that the reports had been reconstructed after the event, making independent verification impossible. Still, the stories continue to circulate because they raise intriguing questions. Could some people unconsciously detect subtle environmental changes before disasters occur? Animals are known to react to vibrations, changes in air pressure, and other signals that humans rarely notice. Could certain children be unusually sensitive to similar cues without realizing it? This explanation does not require psychic abilities, yet it remains largely unproven. Dreams represent another fascinating category. Many parents have described children recounting highly detailed dreams involving future events. Occasionally, parts of those dreams appear to match later experiences. Sleep researchers note that everyone dreams several times each night. Over the course of a year, an individual may experience more than 1,000 dreams. Given enough dreams and enough real-world events, occasional similarities are almost guaranteed by chance alone. Yet some reports involve highly specific details that seem difficult to dismiss. One family described a child who repeatedly drew a damaged bridge weeks before a local bridge partially collapsed during severe flooding. Another reported a young girl who insisted her uncle would arrive unexpectedly after many years abroad, and later that same day, he appeared without warning. Stories like these are compelling. But they also illustrate why careful documentation is essential. Investigators ask important questions. When was the prediction first recorded? Who heard it? Were there multiple witnesses? Could the child have overheard information without realizing it? Were the details precise or vague enough to fit many possible outcomes? These questions help distinguish remarkable anecdotes from evidence that can be objectively evaluated. Psychologists have identified another phenomenon known as confirmation bias. People naturally remember predictions that appear successful while overlooking the many that do not come true. If a child makes dozens of unusual statements each month, only the few that later match real events may be remembered. Over time, this can create the impression of extraordinary accuracy even when chance provides a sufficient explanation. Supporters of psychic phenomena acknowledge this concern but argue that certain well-documented cases remain difficult to explain through coincidence alone. They point to instances where predictions were unusually specific, independently witnessed, and recorded before the events occurred. Such cases remain rare, but they continue to inspire research into human intuition and consciousness. Today, scientists studying intuition recognize that the human brain often processes subtle information below the level of conscious awareness. People sometimes develop a strong feeling that something is wrong without immediately understanding why. Small changes in behavior, tone of voice, facial expression, or environment may be detected unconsciously and produce what feels like an unexplained knowing. Whether this accounts for all reported cases remains an open question. As with many extraordinary claims, the evidence lies somewhere between certainty and mystery. The stories of children who appeared to predict future events remind us that coincidence, intuition, psychology, and the unknown can sometimes become remarkably difficult to separate. In the next chapter, we'll examine another extraordinary claim: children who allegedly read minds through telepathy, astonishing parents, researchers, and skeptics alike with information they seemingly could not have obtained through ordinary means. Part 5. Telepathy. Can children really read minds? Of all the psychic abilities ever claimed, none has captured the public imagination quite like telepathy, the apparent ability to communicate directly from one mind to another without using speech, gestures, or any known physical means. Stories of telepathy appear in nearly every culture. Twins finishing each other's sentences. Family members sensing danger from thousands of miles away. Friends calling each other at precisely the same moment. Most people have experienced at least one coincidence that made them wonder if thoughts can somehow travel between minds. When children are involved, however, these stories often become even more remarkable. Parents sometimes report that very young children answer questions before they are spoken aloud. Others describe children reacting to thoughts that remain completely unspoken. Some claim their child seemed to know exactly what another family member was thinking, even when separated by great distances. Are these simply coincidences? Or could they hint at a form of communication science has yet to explain? One of the most common reports comes from parents of twins. Many twins develop unusually close emotional bonds. They spend nearly every waking hour together during infancy, often learning to communicate through subtle facial expressions, body language, and routines that outsiders barely notice. Because of this closeness, twins sometimes appear to know what the other is about to say or do. Supporters of psychic telepathy suggest that certain twins share a genuine mental connection. Scientists generally offer a different explanation. Identical twins often have remarkably similar genetics, environments, habits, and experiences. After years together, they become exceptionally skilled at reading one another's behavior, often without consciously realizing it. What appears to be mind reading may instead be an extraordinary, but entirely natural, ability to interpret tiny, almost invisible cues. Still, not every reported case fits that explanation. Some families describe children answering questions that were only silently imagined. For example, a parent mentally chooses a color while saying nothing aloud. The child immediately announces the correct answer. Or a child unexpectedly brings a specific object that a parent had only been thinking about retrieving. Single incidents prove very little. Given enough daily interactions, surprising coincidences are inevitable. But when such events appear to repeat over months or years, families naturally begin asking whether something more unusual might be happening. These questions inspired some of the earliest scientific experiments into telepathy. During the 20th century, researchers developed simple card-guessing tests using specially designed symbol cards. One participant viewed a hidden card while another attempted to identify it without seeing the image. Known as Zener card experiments, these studies became central to parapsychology. Children occasionally participated in variations of these experiments because researchers believed they might approach the tests with fewer preconceived expectations than adults. Some studies reported results that appeared slightly better than chance. Others found no meaningful evidence at all. Attempts to replicate positive findings under stricter conditions often produced inconsistent results. Today, the scientific community generally concludes that no reliable evidence has demonstrated telepathy under carefully controlled laboratory conditions. That conclusion, however, has not ended public interest. Another area of investigation focused on emotional connections between parents and children. Many mothers and fathers describe suddenly becoming anxious moments before receiving news that their child has been injured or become ill. Likewise, children sometimes report feeling frightened or upset shortly before learning that something has happened to a parent. Supporters believe these experiences suggest an emotional bond capable of transmitting information beyond ordinary senses. Psychologists point out that parents think about their children constantly. Periods of unexplained worry are common. When nothing happens, those feelings are quickly forgotten. When a real emergency follows, the coincidence becomes unforgettable. Again, selective memory may play a significant role. Researchers have also explored the possibility that children are exceptionally sensitive to nonverbal communication. Long before babies understand language, they become experts at reading facial expressions, voice tone, posture, breathing, and emotional tension. Without realizing it, children may gather enormous amounts of information from these subtle signals. What appears to be psychic knowledge may actually be an impressive form of unconscious observation. This ability is well documented in developmental psychology. Children often detect changes in adults long before those adults consciously recognize them themselves. A child may know that a parent is worried simply by observing tiny shifts in behavior that escape everyone else's attention. To the parent, it can feel almost supernatural. In reality, the child's brain may be performing an extraordinary act of perception rather than mind reading. Yet some reports continue to resist easy explanation. Parapsychologists occasionally describe experiments in which children appeared to identify hidden images, drawings, or numbers at rates that exceeded statistical expectations. These studies remain controversial. Critics argue that subtle flaws in experimental design, unconscious signaling, inadequate controls, or statistical errors can create misleading results. Supporters respond that while many experiments are imperfect, a small number deserve further investigation rather than outright dismissal. Modern neuroscience has revealed that human brains are constantly synchronizing with the people around them. brain activity can become remarkably similar during conversation, shared experiences, music, and cooperative tasks. Some researchers wonder whether this natural synchronization contributes to the powerful feeling that another person knows what we're thinking. At present, there is no accepted evidence that these synchronized brain patterns allow thoughts to travel directly from one mind to another. But they do demonstrate that human connection is far more complex than once believed. Perhaps the greatest lesson from reports of childhood telepathy is not that they prove psychic powers exist. Rather, they remind us how extraordinary the human mind already is. Children observe more than adults often realize. They notice patterns that others overlook. They respond to emotions before words are spoken. And occasionally, their remarkable sensitivity creates moments that seem almost impossible to explain. Whether those moments represent hidden psychological abilities, coincidence, or something entirely unknown remains one of the most fascinating questions in the study of consciousness. In the next chapter, we'll explore children who claim to see what others could not, reports of clairvoyance, invisible companions, and mysterious visions that have intrigued families and researchers for generations. Part 6: Clairvoyance, Seeing Beyond the Ordinary. Imagine a child quietly looking toward an empty corner of a room. No one else notices anything unusual. Then the child begins describing a person standing there. They mention clothing, facial features, even a name. To everyone else, the room is empty. To the child, someone appears to be there. Is it simply imagination? An imaginary friend? A vivid dream spilling into waking life? Or could some children truly perceive information beyond the reach of the normal senses? This is the realm of clairvoyance, a term that literally means clear seeing. Traditionally, clairvoyance refers to the alleged ability to obtain information about people, places, or events without using the ordinary senses. Unlike telepathy, which involves communication between minds, clairvoyance concerns the perception of information that appears inaccessible through normal observation. Reports of clairvoyant children come from every corner of the world. Some describe hidden objects with surprising accuracy. Others claim to see distant locations. Many speak of people whom adults cannot see at all. One of the most frequently reported experiences involves invisible companions. Developmental psychologists estimate that a substantial proportion of children create imaginary friends at some point during early childhood. These companions often help children develop creativity, social skills, and emotional understanding. Most imaginary friends are harmless and disappear naturally as children grow older. Parents may hear conversations taking place with someone who isn't there. The child may set an extra place at the dinner table or insist that their invisible companion has favorite games, foods, or opinions. From a psychological perspective, this behavior is considered entirely normal. Yet some cases differ in unusual ways. Parents occasionally report children describing individuals they have never met, using names or details that later appear to correspond to real people. Others claim their children described deceased relatives before ever seeing photographs or hearing family stories. Such accounts have fueled decades of debate. Supporters suggest that some children may genuinely perceive information unavailable through ordinary means. Skeptics emphasize that family conversations, overlooked clues, accidental information, and selective memory often provide more likely explanations. Another category of reports involves hidden objects. A child claims to know exactly where a lost piece of jewelry can be found. A missing toy turns up precisely where the youngster predicted. A family heirloom is recovered after a child points to an unexpected location. Stories like these are compelling because they involve information that appears capable of objective verification. But investigators ask important questions. How many incorrect guesses occurred before the successful one? Were adults unknowingly providing hints? Did the child previously visit the location without remembering it? Without careful documentation, even impressive stories become difficult to evaluate scientifically. Some researchers have attempted controlled experiments. Children were asked to identify drawings sealed inside envelopes, describe objects hidden in containers, or locate targets placed in distant rooms. Results have generally been inconsistent. Occasionally, a participant appeared to perform better than chance. More often, results fell within normal statistical expectations. Repeated success under tightly controlled conditions has remained elusive. Because of this, mainstream science does not consider clairvoyance an established phenomenon. Nevertheless, individual cases continue to attract attention. One particularly intriguing group of reports involves children describing places they have supposedly never visited. Parents have occasionally claimed that a child correctly identified the layout of a distant home, recognized unfamiliar landmarks, or accurately described rooms inside buildings they had never entered. Such stories naturally invite extraordinary interpretations. Yet ordinary explanations often prove surprisingly powerful. Children absorb enormous amounts of information without adults realizing it. A passing conversation, a television program, a photograph glimpsed for only a moment, or even overheard remarks can later emerge as memories that seem completely original. Psychologists refer to this as cryptomnesia, remembering information while forgetting where it came from. What feels like a psychic vision may actually be a forgotten memory resurfacing. Children are especially susceptible to this phenomenon because their developing brains continuously gather information from their surroundings. There is also the remarkable ability known as pattern recognition. The human brain constantly searches for connections, even when information is incomplete. Some children become exceptionally skilled at noticing details that adults overlook. From tiny clues, they may correctly infer where an object has been hidden or what someone is about to do. To observers, the result can appear almost magical. In reality, it reflects an extraordinary, but natural, cognitive ability. Still, not every report fits comfortably within these explanations. A small number of cases remain unresolved simply because the available evidence is incomplete. Researchers cannot determine whether the information truly could not have been known, or whether crucial details were lost over time. As a result, these stories remain mysteries rather than proof. Modern neuroscience reminds us that perception itself is far more complex than we once believed. Our brains constantly filter, predict, and reconstruct reality. Much of what we see is actually the brain's best interpretation of incomplete sensory information. Understanding this process helps explain why unusual experiences can feel absolutely real, even when different explanations may exist. For families, however, the experience is often deeply personal. When a child calmly describes something no one else appears able to perceive, parents naturally search for answers. Some find comfort in spiritual beliefs. Others seek medical or psychological guidance. Many simply listen, observe, and avoid jumping to conclusions. Perhaps that balanced approach offers the wisest path. Children deserve to be heard without their experiences being dismissed outright. At the same time, extraordinary claims require careful investigation before extraordinary conclusions are reached. The mystery lies not only in whether clairvoyance exists, but in understanding how the developing human mind interprets a world that is already filled with wonder. In the next chapter, we'll explore one of the most emotionally compelling areas of this subject: children who claim to communicate with deceased loved ones, and the difficult questions those stories continue to raise for families, researchers, and skeptics alike. Part 7: Speaking with the Dead, Children Who Claim to See Spirits. Few experiences are more unsettling for a parent than hearing a young child calmly describe a conversation with someone who has already died. It often begins with a simple statement. "Grandma came to see me last night. The old man in my room says he's waiting for someone. The lady in the blue dress told me not to be afraid." To the child, these encounters may seem completely ordinary. To the adults listening, they can be deeply emotional, comforting, or frightening. Reports of children claiming to see deceased relatives or unknown individuals have been recorded for centuries. Some families interpret these experiences as evidence that children are naturally more connected to the spiritual world. Others believe they are vivid products of imagination, dreams, or the developing brain. The challenge is that many of these experiences feel profoundly real to the children who report them. Psychologists emphasize that young children often move fluidly between imagination and reality. Dreams can seem as vivid as waking life. Imaginary companions may feel completely real. Children may describe events with great confidence, even when those events originated in fantasy or misunderstanding. This does not mean they are lying. Rather, it reflects the way young minds process experiences while learning to distinguish imagination, memory, and external reality. Yet some reported cases contain details that families claim are difficult to explain. One of the most common accounts involves children describing deceased relatives they supposedly never met. A 3-year-old might identify an old photograph and correctly name the person. Another child may describe a grandparent who died years before they were born. Occasionally, families claim the child mentioned personal habits, favorite sayings, or family events that had never been discussed in their presence. Supporters view such stories as possible evidence of communication beyond death. Skeptics suggest more ordinary explanations. Children often overhear conversations without adults realizing it. Old photographs may have been seen briefly months earlier. Information can be absorbed unconsciously and later recalled without remembering its source. Human memory is remarkably complex, especially during early childhood. Another recurring theme involves children describing unfamiliar individuals. Some speak about the man by the window or the lady in the hallway. Others insist that invisible visitors watch over them at bedtime. Most of these experiences occur between the ages of 2 and 7, a period when imagination is especially active. Developmental psychologists note that children at this age commonly engage in pretend play and may assign personalities to invisible companions. These experiences are generally considered a normal part of childhood development. However, not every report fits neatly into that explanation. Some parents insist their children described historical clothing, names, or events that were later verified through independent research. Such cases are rare and often difficult to investigate because they rely heavily on personal testimony. Without recordings made before the facts became known, independent verification becomes extremely challenging. Hospitals have also documented intriguing anecdotes involving children receiving end-of-life care. Doctors, nurses, and hospice workers occasionally report young patients speaking peacefully about deceased relatives who had come to take them home. These stories have been shared by medical professionals around the world. Some view them as comforting spiritual experiences. Others believe they may result from changes in brain chemistry, medication, or the psychological process of approaching death. Modern medicine does not have a single accepted explanation. Researchers studying grief have observed another important factor. Following the death of a loved one, families naturally search for signs of continued connection. Small coincidences may take on profound emotional meaning. A child's unexpected comment can provide enormous comfort during a period of intense loss. Psychologists caution that grief can sometimes influence how conversations are remembered or interpreted. This does not diminish the emotional value of the experience. It simply reminds us that human memory is shaped by emotion as much as by fact. One particularly interesting question concerns why these reports appear to decline with age. Many children who once claimed to see spirits eventually stop mentioning them altogether. Believers suggest that children gradually lose a natural spiritual sensitivity as they mature. Psychologists propose that cognitive development helps children distinguish imagination, dreams, internal thoughts, and external reality more consistently. Either explanation could account for the pattern, or perhaps both contribute in different ways. Scientific investigation of these reports presents enormous challenges. Experiences are usually spontaneous. They cannot be scheduled or reproduced under laboratory conditions. Researchers must depend on interviews, family recollections, medical records, and witness statements. This makes it difficult to separate genuine mysteries from misunderstandings, faulty memory, or coincidence. Even so, the consistency of certain themes across cultures continues to intrigue researchers. Children often describe visitors as peaceful rather than frightening. Many report receiving reassuring messages. Others speak of being told that everything will be all right. Whether interpreted as psychological coping mechanisms or something more extraordinary, these experiences frequently bring comfort rather than fear. Perhaps that is one reason these stories endure. They touch upon humanity's oldest questions. Does consciousness survive death? Can loved ones somehow remain connected to us? Or do these experiences reveal the remarkable ways the human mind processes love, loss, memory, and hope? No single answer satisfies everyone. For believers, these accounts offer glimpses of a reality beyond the physical world. For skeptics, they illustrate the extraordinary creativity and resilience of the developing human mind. And for many families, they remain deeply personal experiences that resist easy explanation. In the next chapter, we'll leave family homes behind and enter the laboratory, exploring how scientists have attempted to test claims of psychic children under controlled conditions, and why those experiments have produced some of the most controversial results in the history of parapsychology. Part 8: Testing the Impossible: Scientific Investigations of Psychic Children. Extraordinary stories can inspire curiosity. But science asks a different question. Can extraordinary abilities be demonstrated under carefully controlled conditions? A child may correctly predict an event once. They may describe a hidden object. They may appear to know another person's thoughts. Interesting as these reports may be, scientists must determine whether the results can be repeated, measured, and independently verified. Without that, even the most astonishing story remains an anecdote rather than scientific evidence. This challenge has shaped the study of psychic phenomena for more than a century. Beginning in the late 19th century, researchers in Europe and the United States became increasingly interested in claims involving telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, and other extraordinary experiences. Organizations devoted to the systematic investigation of unusual phenomena emerged, hoping to separate genuine discoveries from fraud, coincidence, and misunderstanding. While most early research focused on adults, children occasionally became subjects of investigation because many researchers believed they might be less influenced by expectation or prior beliefs. The logic was straightforward. If psychic abilities truly existed, perhaps they would be easier to observe before adulthood. Children generally have fewer preconceived ideas about what should or should not be possible. They may also respond more naturally during experiments. Others disagreed completely. Critics argued that children are more easily influenced by suggestion, more eager to please adults, and more likely to confuse imagination with reality. These concerns remain central to research today. One of the earliest experimental methods involved simple guessing games. A child might be asked to identify a symbol hidden on the opposite side of a card. Another experiment involved selecting one colored object from several possibilities without seeing it. Researchers carefully calculated how often correct guesses should occur by chance alone. If a participant consistently scored well above chance over many trials, the results would deserve closer examination. Most children performed exactly as statistics predicted. Occasionally, however, a participant produced results that appeared unusually successful. Were these examples of genuine psychic ability? Not necessarily. Scientists immediately looked for alternative explanations. Could the child have received subtle visual cues? Had the researcher unknowingly influenced the answers through tone of voice or facial expression? Were the statistical methods sound? These questions became increasingly important as experimental techniques improved. One famous source of error became known as the Clever Hans effect. In the early 20th century, a horse named Clever Hans appeared capable of solving mathematical problems. Crowds were amazed as the horse tapped out correct answers with remarkable accuracy. Eventually, investigators discovered that Hans was not performing arithmetic at all. Instead, he had become extraordinarily skilled at reading tiny, unconscious movements made by the people asking the questions. Without realizing it, humans were giving away the answers. The lesson transformed psychological research. Scientists realized that even the smallest unconscious signals could influence experimental results. As a result, modern studies use carefully designed double-blind procedures. In a double-blind experiment, neither the participant nor the researcher interacting with them knows the correct answer during the test. This greatly reduces the possibility of unconscious cueing. If accurate results continue under these conditions, they become much more meaningful. Many experiments involving alleged psychic children have used these stricter methods. The results, however, have been mixed. Some studies reported small statistical effects suggesting performance slightly above chance. Other laboratories found no unusual results at all. Perhaps the greatest challenge has been replication. In science, one successful experiment is rarely enough. Independent researchers must be able to repeat the findings under similar conditions. Psychic research has struggled in this area. Experiments that appear promising in one laboratory often fail to produce the same results elsewhere. Because of this inconsistency, mainstream science has remained unconvinced. Researchers have also explored whether emotional connections influence performance. Some studies paired children with parents, siblings, or close friends, wondering whether strong relationships might improve telepathic communication. While a few experiments reported intriguing outcomes, larger reviews generally concluded that the evidence remained inconclusive. Beyond laboratory testing, investigators have examined spontaneous reports from families. When parents claimed their child accurately predicted an event or described hidden information, researchers attempted to document exactly what had happened. Whenever possible, they searched for written notes, recordings, independent witnesses, and time-stamped evidence created before the event occurred. This approach helps reduce the risk of memory errors or hindsight bias. One recurring problem is that remarkable stories often grow more dramatic with repeated retelling. Details may unintentionally change over time. Conversations become shorter. Predictions seem more specific than they originally were. Investigators therefore place great importance on the earliest available records. Modern neuroscience has added another perspective. Brain imaging studies show that children's brains are constantly developing during the first decade of life. Their attention, memory, imagination, emotional processing, and pattern recognition change rapidly from year to year. Abilities that seem mysterious may sometimes reflect the remarkable flexibility of the developing brain rather than paranormal perception. This does not necessarily explain every unusual report, but it provides valuable insight into how children experience and interpret the world. Today, most psychologists agree on one important principle. Children reporting extraordinary experiences should be treated with respect rather than ridicule. Dismissing them outright can create fear or confusion. At the same time, investigators must avoid leading questions or reinforcing beliefs without evidence. The goal is neither to prove nor disprove psychic abilities. It is to understand the child's experience as accurately and compassionately as possible. After more than 100 years of investigation, the scientific verdict remains cautious. There is no broadly accepted evidence demonstrating that psychic abilities have been reliably verified in children under controlled conditions. Yet neither have all reports been explained to everyone's satisfaction. Some cases remain unresolved, not because they prove the paranormal, but because the available evidence is incomplete or open to multiple interpretations. Science continues to investigate with curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to follow the evidence wherever it leads. In the final chapter, we'll step back from the individual cases and ask the larger question. Why do stories of psychic children continue to captivate us? What do they reveal about belief, consciousness, family, and the enduring mystery of the human mind? Part 9: The Enduring Mystery of Psychic Children. For thousands of years, humanity has been captivated by stories of children who appeared to know more than they possibly should. A child predicts an accident. Another recognizes a stranger without ever meeting them. A young boy describes a place he has supposedly never visited. A little girl speaks of a deceased relative with astonishing familiarity. Whether these accounts represent genuine psychic abilities, extraordinary intuition, coincidence, or the remarkable workings of the developing mind, they continue to inspire fascination around the world. One reason these stories remain so compelling is that children are generally viewed as honest observers. Very young children rarely invent elaborate stories for personal gain. When they describe something unusual, adults naturally pay attention. Yet honesty is not the same as accuracy. Children sincerely report experiences exactly as they perceive them, even when those perceptions arise from dreams, imagination, misunderstood information, or incomplete memories. This distinction lies at the heart of nearly every investigation. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored a wide range of extraordinary claims. Stories of telepathy. Reports of clairvoyance. Accounts of precognition. Children who appeared to remember previous lives. youngsters who claim to communicate with deceased loved ones, and scientific attempts to test these remarkable experiences under controlled conditions. Some cases became easier to understand after careful investigation. Others remain open questions. One important lesson emerges again and again. Extraordinary claims deserve both open-minded curiosity and careful critical thinking. Approaching these stories with unquestioning belief can lead to mistaken conclusions. Rejecting every unusual experience without investigation may also cause us to overlook important insights into human psychology, or perhaps even aspects of consciousness we do not yet understand. The healthiest approach lies somewhere between those extremes. Modern psychology has revealed that children possess astonishing cognitive abilities. They absorb information continuously. They notice subtle emotional changes. They detect patterns adults overlook. They remember seemingly insignificant details that later become surprisingly important. Sometimes these entirely natural abilities create experiences that feel almost supernatural. At the same time, neuroscience reminds us that the human brain remains one of the least understood structures in the known universe. Scientists continue to investigate consciousness, memory, intuition, dreams, and perception. Each new discovery answers some questions while raising many others. It is entirely possible that future research will deepen our understanding of experiences that today remain unexplained. Whether those discoveries ultimately support paranormal interpretations or reveal new psychological mechanisms remains impossible to predict. Perhaps the greatest value of studying psychic children lies not in proving or disproving extraordinary abilities. Instead, these stories encourage us to ask better questions. How does memory truly work? What shapes intuition? How much information does the unconscious mind process without our awareness? Why do some experiences feel profoundly meaningful, even when ordinary explanations remain possible? And are there aspects of human consciousness that science has only begun to explore? These questions reach far beyond the subject of psychic children. They touch the foundations of psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, and spirituality. Different cultures answer them in different ways. Some see evidence of an enduring soul. Others point to the remarkable creativity of the human brain. Still others remain comfortably uncertain, accepting that not every mystery demands an immediate conclusion. Perhaps uncertainty itself has value. History reminds us that many ideas once considered impossible later became accepted scientific discoveries. At the same time, history also teaches that many extraordinary claims eventually found perfectly ordinary explanations. The challenge is learning to distinguish one from the other. That requires patience, evidence, humility, and a willingness to change our minds when new information appears. Parents who encounter unusual experiences with their children may find this balanced perspective especially helpful. Listening carefully. Asking thoughtful questions. Avoiding ridicule. Seeking appropriate medical or psychological guidance when necessary. And resisting the temptation to jump too quickly toward either supernatural certainty or automatic dismissal. Children deserve understanding first. Explanations can come later. Ultimately, the stories you've heard are not simply about psychic abilities. They are about curiosity. About the enduring human desire to understand ourselves. About the mysteries of childhood, consciousness, and the possibility that reality may be more complex than we currently imagine. Whether you finish this journey convinced that psychic abilities exist, persuaded that psychology explains the reports, or somewhere between those positions, one fact remains undeniable. The mystery continues. And perhaps that is why these remarkable stories have survived for generations. They remind us that the greatest frontier may not lie among the stars, but within the extraordinary potential of the human mind. Thank you for listening to Psychic Children, Extraordinary Claims and Real-Life Stories. Whatever your conclusions, may they always be guided by curiosity, compassion, and a commitment to following the evidence wherever it leads. Closing reflections, wonder, skepticism, and the search for truth. As we've reached the end of this exploration, one thing has become clear. The subject of psychic children cannot be neatly placed into a single category. Some stories appear to dissolve under careful investigation. Others become more intriguing the closer they're examined. Many remain suspended somewhere in between, neither fully explained nor convincingly demonstrated. That uncertainty can be frustrating. But it is also what makes this subject so fascinating. History has repeatedly shown that science advances by asking difficult questions. It also advances by demanding reliable evidence. Wonder alone is not enough. Neither is skepticism without investigation. The most meaningful discoveries often emerge when curiosity and critical thinking work together. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson these stories have to offer. Children remind us to observe the world with fresh eyes. They notice details adults overlook. They ask questions adults have stopped asking. They approach life with imagination, honesty, and a willingness to accept possibilities that older minds may dismiss too quickly. At the same time, adulthood teaches the value of evidence, careful reasoning, and the importance of questioning our assumptions. The balance between those two perspectives, childlike curiosity and scientific discipline, is where genuine understanding begins. Whether psychic abilities ultimately prove to be real phenomena, misunderstood psychology, remarkable intuition, or a combination of many different factors, they continue to inspire research into one of humanity's greatest mysteries, consciousness itself. How does the mind create experience? Why do certain memories feel so vivid? How do intuition, emotion, and perception interact? And could there still be aspects of the human mind that remain undiscovered? These questions extend far beyond psychic children. They touch philosophy, neuroscience, psychology, spirituality, and physics. They challenge us to remain humble about what we know and what we have yet to learn. If this audiobook has accomplished anything, it is not to convince you of a particular conclusion. Rather, it is to encourage thoughtful exploration. To examine extraordinary claims with both an open mind and a critical eye. To appreciate compelling stories without confusing them with proof. And to recognize that genuine mysteries deserve careful investigation rather than immediate acceptance or dismissal. The search for answers continues. New technologies, improved scientific methods, and future discoveries may one day shed more light on these remarkable reports. Or they may reveal entirely new explanations that we have not yet imagined. Until then, the stories of psychic children remain part of one of humanity's oldest traditions, the search to understand the hidden potential of the human mind. Thank you for joining this journey through one of the most intriguing and controversial subjects in the world of the unexplained. If you enjoyed this audiobook and would like to explore more mysteries surrounding consciousness, the paranormal, ancient wisdom, and unexplained phenomena, be sure to continue with our other titles. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep seeking evidence, and never lose your sense of wonder.